So this is my test on C-log versus C-log3 on my Canon R6. So the first shot here, um, I have my settings over here, f5.0 ISO 400, which is the base ISO for C-log. And the second shot is 5.6 and ISO 800, which is the base ISO for C-log3. And between these two shots, you can see in the waveform, the exposure is very similar. I made sure this portion, the pillar, the white part is set to just under my zebra, which was set at 90. So you can see that this bright part is just under 90. Same with this one. So this is C-log, this is C-log3. Keep that in mind. What's interesting though is that when I turn on this LUT, which I apply to this adjustment layer, if I click it, it'll show you over here. That's the C-log1 LUT, and this is C-log3. They're both YDR full to full 33 grid. Those are Canon supplied LUTs. What's interesting is that even though, let me turn this back off, even though I shot it at the same highlight clipping area, that's the best way I can put it. When you apply the LUT, it shows a very different result. You can see C-log is this one right here. You can see, just pay attention to the waveform. And then C-log3 is like that, even though the exposure was pretty much the same. So this got me thinking, there's something, I mean, I don't want to say there's something wrong with the LUT, but I want to say the LUT, Canon supply LUT, is very aggressive in terms of bringing up the highlights and also bringing down the shadows. Watch again. C-log1, C-log3, C-log3. So my next clip, this one, is 7.1 and ISO 800, C-log3. The reason I did that is because if you start from here, this is again C-log, base ISO 400. This is basically the exposure equivalent of C-log3 using the base ISO. So we went from 400 to 800, that's one stop, and we went from 5.0 to 7.1, which is also one stop. So they, cancel each other out. So look at the waveform now. It went from this C-log, C-log3, C-log, C-log. You can see the shadows are at the same level. C-log, C-log3. But on the C-log, the highlights are pulled up higher, and C-log3 compresses more, which means it's giving you, it's giving you more dynamic range because it's compressing more data into a smaller IRE scale. You can see visually, if I go back to C-log, just look at this part right here, this white part. You can see on C-log3, it gets slightly dimmer. You'll also see that in the sky. See? But now when I turn on the LUTs, let's go back to C-log. This is C-log, and this is C-log3. Do you see that? There's very little difference between C-log and C-log3 when the exposure settings are matched. And this is my next example. Between these two clips, I matched the highlight clipping to this area down here. I make sure that's at 90 or just under 90, I think. Let me show you. Let me show you my mask. So that's where my mask is. And if I go to the scope waveform, you'll see that it's sitting at 80 right there. Same with this one. This is C-log3. So they're matched pretty much in terms of exposure. And let me turn off the mask. Let me go back to the C-log. So these two are what it looks like before the LUT. You can see in this area, the shadows are brighter. So now let me turn on the Canon LUT. It's on, and that's what it looks like. C-log, C-log3. Again, C-log3's LUT is pushing the highlights way too much for my taste. And there's all these room down here. But it does give you more information in the shadows. You can see down here too. There's also a little more noise, but we'll get to that later when I show you the night scenes. It's a lot more visible. So let me go to the next scene. These two, hold on, let me turn off my LUT. These two are matched in terms of my highlight setting. The zebra was set to 90 at this area down here. So that's what it looks like raw without any LUT. C-log, C-log3. Let me turn on my LUT. And you'll see again the highlights are pushed up way too high. I mean, it does a good job of lifting the shadows too, but for me, I think I would go in here and actually bring down some of the highlights and midtones. So then when you compare it to C-log, it makes a little more sense. Anyway, so let's go to the next example. This example I feel like is a better, or I want to say the best use of C-log3 as opposed to C-log. Let me show you why. So my test was done based on my zebra setting at 90. This little corner here in the windowsill, the bright area, that's where my 90 was. And these two, hold on, let me turn off my LUT. These two are raw log shots. This is C-log, this is C-log3. I know the exposure is different, 2.8 to 3.2 and ISO 800, which is basically 2/3 of a stop brighter, because we went from 400 to 800, which is one stop, but then we went from 2.8 to 3.0, which is 1/3 of a stop down, so we're left with 2/3 of a stop. When I turn on my LUT, this is what happens. C-log, C-log3. Again, you'll see a lift in like the midtone and the highlights, but the shadows sort of remain the same. Like this part down here, which I think it's my shirt, sort of remains the same, but on C-log3 it pushes everything from the middle to the highlights. But if you look at the image, you'll see especially these walls on the sides, they get brighter. And honestly, I don't mind that. I think that's how I would expose it. So the next example is sort of like an interview lighting setting, I'm using aperture 120D. This is C-log3, ISO 400. You'll see, and this is 3.2 800. My highlight zebra was set to 90, and it was in this corner, just the bright area of the lamp. So that's how the shots were matched. Let me turn off the LUT. So this is C-log3, C-log, C-log3. Watch the shadows sort of remain the same at the bottom area, but it gets lifted up in C-log3, and it also compresses down the highlights too. So it's preserving more data. And then when I apply the LUT, this is C-log, this is C-log3, C-log3. If you use C-log3 at night, the only thing it's gonna do is it's gonna raise the noise level in the shadows. You can see here, while not really gaining much in the highlights. I mean, it does something. You'll see here. If you look at the neon sign, this is C-log3, C-log3. You can see it actually preserves a little more of the highlights, but at the cost of raising the shadows and therefore increasing the noise level. Pay attention to the waveform here. Let me go back to C-log, and this is C-log3, C-log3. For this one, I deliberately didn't change the setting at all between C-log and C-log3, so you'll see what happens in the waveform. C-log3, C-log3, it gets lifted. So on the third one, I exposed for the highlights, and I'm matching that with the highlights from C-log. So I had to go from 6400 to 10,000, which is, I think 10,000 is too much for a scene like this. So let me apply the LUT here. C-log, C-log3, C-log3 again, but with 10,000 ISO. So you do get more information in the highlights if you crank up the ISO like that, but the noise here is horrendous. Hold on, let me show you what it means right here. You can see the noise, and this is C-log3, a lot cleaner. This is C-log3 with the same setting, 6400. It's not 10,000. So yeah, let me go back to 100. It's I would personally, based on my test anyway, I would only use it in this kind of situation where you have really bright highlights and deep shadows, and you want to capture both of them. Because in those situations, you never have to go past the base ISO of 800. And you're going to be using your ND filter anyway too. So, you have to assess your scene first and then expose accordingly. For night scenes, I would recommend using C-log because it's less noisy, and also night scenes in general, it's not a high dynamic range situation, so you're able to capture what is it, like 10 stops, or is it 8 stops? I think whatever it is, it's the artificial lights like neon and the street lights. They're never bright enough for the camera to capture. So C-log does that really well, especially up to 6400 ISO. I think that's about the limit of using C-log at night, and I fortunately that's enough to capture pretty much every artificial light situation outdoors in an urban area. My only other time I would use non-log is when you're shooting in a nightclub. I don't have an example here right now, but I'll show that next time when I'm shooting at like 20,000, 10,000 ISO. Um, that's when it's beneficial to shoot in regular standard Rec 709 mode. Okay, that's it for me today. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.